session 2, where we are going to work on developing content, revising it, and editing it. A couple of steps that all go together. Our topic this time is that we want to focus on this idea of revising and editing. It's not just about what we write the first time, but how we tackle editing that and making sure that it is as clear as possible. So, as it says here, once you have the words on paper, what are the things you need to do to make them more effective? Part of this is going to be me having a conversation with you through feedback and support, but it's also about exploring what kind of questions you can ask yourself once you've moved on from our particular course. So we're going to work on all of those tools to add to your toolbox. And we're going to work on editing our writing and utilizing that feedback. So it means that we want to look at APA style with an APA quiz. We want to look at InText citations, which we're going to do with a worksheet. And we're also doing the revision of our session 1 paper. All of these are different sort of steps of the same piece. But remember, it's just about learning right now. It's about trying these ideas. You shouldn't be perfect on your first round. So don't beat yourself up if you feel like you haven't gotten everything just right. Ask questions, explore, and try these things and see how you grow over the course of the entire term and into your future classes. Our topic outcomes are to articulate the significance of plagiarism and how to avoid it. Well, generally it's pretty easy, and you may feel like, well, why do we need to do all this extra stuff? Well, there are some details that may surprise you. For instance, did you know that if you reuse your very own work, that could count as plagiarism? It does, in the sense that when we're writing for a particular course and a particular purpose, that work belongs to that particular moment in time. So for instance, our session 1 paper, it's for this class. It's for session 1. It has sort of parameters around it. If you take something very similar to it and you reuse it as is, or you alter it slightly and turn it in for another class, that can be flagged as plagiarism. It's very easy to avoid though, because if you've written something or worked on something and you like to do it again, or you like to take an idea and continue working on it, all you have to do is reach out to your instructor and say, hey, I wrote about this in English 103 for session 1, or for our academic paper in session 4. You can say, hey, I really enjoy learning about this topic. Could I continue to work on it? It may have some of the same features, but I want to take it a couple more steps. That's a great conversation to have and absolutely useful. We are also going to look at revising written communication based on feedback. Well, this can be a little tricky in the sense that you may feel that, well, if your instructor said to do it, that's how it should be. But now that you're at university, that's not entirely necessarily true. We're having a conversation about material, about approaches, and we want to be clear with our writing. So I'm acting as your audience, and I'm saying, what does that mean? Or how could a word be better? I'm also going to point out what you're doing well, because I want you to see how you're doing that and how it's working and why it's working. So for instance, if you did a great job with parallel structure, I'm going to call that out and say, look, this is called parallel structure, and you did it. You aced this. And I'm going to do that for the things that aren't as perfect either. But I'm also going to give you options for how to fix it, because there are so many ways to be right and correct when we're writing. And my aim is not to tell you how you should fix it, but to give you options and let you choose the best approach for you, because it's also about you finding what you like and how you like to do that. So I may prefer a semicolon, and you may prefer a comma with a joining word. Those are decisions that we should get to make ourselves, and I hope that I teach you that effectively this term. As always, we're reading and looking at different items. So our viewing is all about the APA requirements and looking at APA details. That preps us for our quiz. But we're also looking at more parts. As you can see, still quite a few chapters in the Pocket Keys for Writers. I want to remind you again that it may not be the best use of your time to just read every single page, but it is a great idea to look at key points, to look at the headings and the subheadings and ask what words are familiar, which ones are unfamiliar, and do some skimming. And as you go through that, if you find your attention is caught, we'll pause and read that area more carefully. Read it word by word. But in general, have a skim through this. And then as issues come up, you can go back into the book and look at those particular areas. As a whole, if you just read it, it's a bit like, learning a computer program, like how do I function in Word, and not actually working on a paper, because then we're like, well, I learned how to do that, but I don't know what it's for. So part of this is skimming it and preparing, and then as you get to those questions, you'll be ready. We always have our biblical perspective, of course, and I really wanted to talk about this one because it brings up such an incredibly important idea. One of the best ways to improve your writing is to be a reader. And what I really hope you start to do in our particular course, and what I hope has kind of started to influence you as well as you're reading the Bible, is that there are different voices in what we read. And it's a great plan to say, well, why is this voice different? What kind of language are they using? What kind of sentence structure? How do they use punctuation? Maybe differently than another person. So as we start to work on our 5-paragraph paper format, and we start to practice our thesis, and we look at how we embed quotes, these are things you should also be reading for. So especially when we get to session 4 in our academic paper, as you're reading resources, say, well, where's the thesis? Where did they put that thesis? Is it in a place I expected? How are they setting up the key points? Are they sort of clouding it and keeping it away from me so I have to keep reading, which is definitely what we do with fiction to pull us through each chapter? Or what they should be doing with nonfiction, which is setting us up with all the information right off the get-go, and then really supporting that information with more details and quotes. How are they doing those quotes? What does it look like? Sometimes, based on just the quotes alone, we can figure out if it's APA, MLA, or more of a blogging style. There are lots of different formatting styles out there. And this is a great opportunity to say, well, what are they doing? How are they doing that? Does that make sense to me? What do I like? What do I not like? That's always a big part of figuring out our own personal voice. But reading is one of my first tips for anyone who wants to write better. Our assignments this week are kind of like most of our weeks. We're pretty full here. We have 4. So we have our discussion thread. We're back down to 1, unlike that first unit session where we tend to have 2 discussions. Then we are looking at our submitted assignment on revision, where we practice that. We have a quiz on APA, and we have an InText citation worksheet. I have a number of videos on these different items, so I hope you will review them and ask lots of questions. So our discussion thread, remember, it should include a primary or main post as well as 2 peer responses. So our question here is about plagiarism, and as we explore all the feedback that we're looking at, all of the directions and ideas about what is plagiarism and how does it work, we want to ask some questions, not just about why we shouldn't do it, but what exactly is surprising or interesting about it, and how we can make sure we don't fall afoul of those lines. So a great place to start is the academic integrity section of the student handbook, pages 33 through 35. And the questions we're specifically responding to are, why is it so important for a Christ follower to adhere to high standards of integrity? Honestly, I think you can put in anyone. Making mistakes with plagiarism can absolutely destroy someone's career, and they can lose all access to everything they've ever worked for. This has happened in the business community, it has happened in the writing community, happened in the academic community. There are very few places that this doesn't have an absolutely overwhelming impact. But don't let that worry you. A lot of times what we see in big stories is things where someone has purposefully and willfully pursued lying, where they haven't shared what they truly wrote. They are taking it from someone else, and they're doing that on purpose. A lot of times people do these things unwittingly, and it is just a matter of a conversation to straighten that miscommunication up. And we don't hear about those stories because obviously someone just communicates with them and they solve it. But we want to offer at least one concept or verse from the Bible to support why we would want to be a person of integrity with high standards when we're writing. And we're going to consider this idea. What are some strategies, especially too, that we plan to use in the future to ensure that we don't plagiarize, that we ensure we keep all of these things as clear as possible? Our submitted assignment is all about revision, and I wanted to bring this idea up first. You have to wait for my feedback in order to respond to the feedback, but please let me know your schedule. Of course, I aim for Monday and Tuesday grading so that I can give you the rest of the week to tackle whatever you're working on. But if you have a particular schedule and you're worried, like what if she's late this week and it's Wednesday or Thursday and I can't fit that in, please don't hesitate to let me know what by which day of the week you need that feedback so that I can make sure I put you at the top of the list. I try to move around on the alphabet so that I start, in the middle sometimes with grading, or at the top or at the bottom, those kinds of things, so that everyone gets a fair chance of getting a relaxed and clear-headed feedback from me versus being the last person on a really long list. But don't hesitate to do that. I'm always happy to work on that with you. So this is our first session with revision. After this, we're going to see that happen again in sessions 4 and 5, where you are going to take a paper, so session 3, literary analysis. I'm going to give you feedback and you're going to revise it for session 4. Session 4 paper, academic paper, again, once you turn that in for session 4, you'll get feedback and you'll reply to that feedback in session 5. So it's going to become a more consistent thing, which is really, really important because it's teaching us a lot about writing. And I really encourage you to watch my full video on revisions and what those can look like. But you're essentially taking those ideas, I'm commenting on it, and you are incorporating it. So there are a couple of things that are happening there. One, I'm commenting within your paper. So I may highlight something or underline it or leave a comment. I'm also going to use the feedback bubble to share details with you. So as you turn this in as a doc, you'll see that there are 2 to 3 places where I'm giving you feedback about that paper. And you also have a couple of options for how you reply to that feedback. We're going to look at those in the revision video that I have, but I want to encourage you to sort of explore and ask questions about what works for you. It can very much depend on sort of what computer you're using, what sort of application you're using. So if you're using Word, if you're using Pages, if you're using Google Docs, if you're using OpenOffice, these can all have an impact on how you reply to feedback. So if you feel like you're struggling with that in any way, please don't hesitate to reach out and I can help you with your particular program. So you can do things like track changes as you respond to it. You can also, we'll see a couple of pictures in the revisions where you just make those alterations and then that is clearly done. But you can also ask questions about that feedback or explore it further in the submission text box or at the end of your paper as well, or within the comment section. So again, make sure you're watching that video to look at more details. Our quiz is about APA and it's about 20 questions and we get, 4 minutes apiece? 2 minutes apiece. I'm not good at that. Okay. Check out the APA study guide and the student lounge and remember our steps. Start by taking it. You'll be surprised by what you know, and you won't know what it looks like and what kinds of questions there are until you take it. And then check out the study guide and ask me questions. Finally, retake it. That's how we study smart. It's a way to use our time wisely and grow, and it is not cheating as a student once felt it was. It is not. It is the best and brightest way to approach these. And remember, if you feel like you've done poorly twice, don't hesitate to reach out because there are options. Our InText citation worksheet, there is again a video. Right here is that video. It's our worksheet and I will walk you through a couple of the samples and we're going to do that in just a moment as well. There are occasionally issues with downloading that document, so if you download it and it is all lined up and it works fine, that's great. If you download it to Word and it's not lining up and you're not sure what goes where, check the student lounge for a secondary copy. Or if you're having trouble period with Word, don't hesitate to download the PDF version, in which case you can respond to each of the list items by just making a list of 1 through 10 and writing down what that citation would look like. So there are lots of options here. If it goes a little wonky on you, I'm here to help with all of those as well. So this is essentially what we should be seeing when we bring up that quiz. So we have, the title and all of that, and we start to have our information here, and it's not necessarily academic. It's just a fun example to get us going. So we see a space for a citation, and we're told which reference to go look at. So this tells us that this area is a paraphrase from that particular citation, and so we need to put in not a page number, but an author, and a year. So we're going to go to reference C, which I have over here, A, B, C, so this one. And so I'm going to need to put in National Society of Dragon Research, comma, in period D, period. And that's going to go inside these 2 parentheses. So what is that about in D? So APA demands a date. It wants a date for it. Sometimes our date may just be a year. Sometimes our date could be a year and a month, a year, month, day, lots of options in that case. However, there are plenty of things where we really can't find a date for it. And if we can't, we're going to put in period D period because this is an abbreviation of no date. And that is going to go with us everywhere. In previous versions of APA, if we didn't have that, if we had ND in the reference, we just didn't put it here in the citation. But APA 7 says any date, every date must be included. So right here in our parentheses, we would write down National Society of Dragon Research, comma, in period D period, and then our extra parenthesis closing it off. So let's scroll down to this one. You can see these are a little tighter. Here is A, here is B, here is E, and here is B again. So sometimes they're going to look a little different from one another. So in this case, if we need reference A to go in these parentheses, we're going to go look over here. It's a person's name, so we're going to use Cadmus. Well, our references have lots of information, like initials and other details. Those don't go into our citation because we want to encourage people to come to the reference and see all the good stuff. So we're just going to write the name Cadmus, and then we're going to use the date, 2019. Then we look at it and we say, well, did they ask us for anything? Some of these are going to tell us which page number to use, in which case we would add that page number as well. But if it doesn't ask us for that, we're not going to include it. So we're going to look at each one of these, and we're generally looking for the first word, which is going to be a person's name or an organization. And then we're looking for the date, which may be just a year, it may be a year and a month, a day, whatever quantity we get, we're going to use the year within our citation, only the year. And of course, we could use ND if there is no date. And then that's it, unless it says there's a page number and it tells us which page to cite. So let's glance at these examples. These are sort of four basic ones that we would see. This just means that it's at the end of whatever we saw. We have our quote, we have our sentence, we have our paraphrase, whatever elements, and then we're just putting the person's name and the year, or person's name, year, and page. This is what we call embedding a citation. So we're saying according to Cadmus, and that's where we put the year, and then we would have our sentence with our quote. But notice this one. It says, according to Cadmus, parens 2019, comma, there are, and then we would have our quote to insert, and then we have a second parenthesis. That is really surprising, right? Like, why do two? Why can't we just put this all together? Well, because we so often don't have a page number or a paragraph number these days, obviously we still have books and all of those things, but there are so many resources that do not have page numbers or clear paragraphs that we could number. So because of that, we often don't have a location. We call that the locating parenthetical citation. So we prep all of our citation as though we don't have that. And then if we're lucky and we do, we include it at the end close to the actual quote. You'll always see that this location element is right beside where whatever it is came from, and that we keep those connected. So if you find that there are two citations, don't feel surprised. That is something APA does quite often. So explore, test these different things, watch some of these videos because there are videos walking you through revision and walking you through this InText citation worksheet and how to do it depending on what format you are utilizing it in or tackling that assignment in. And of course, as always, I am happy to be here to answer questions.